Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Dr. Craig Sincock of Woodbridge, Virginia. For me, it is an honor to come to you today as a citizen, an Army officer of 34 years, and a surviving spouse of September 11, 2001. Before I proceed into the things that I had written down, this gentleman on the right side of me, Brian Bridwell, is the only survivor out of my wife's office. He is now my dearest friend. He's like a brother to me. The Pentagon was my building, and it was my wife's building too, my wife Cheryle. I was first stationed there in 1985 as a brand new W-2 of the Army. My wife came in 1987, working as an Army civil servant. Both of us went to work there, usually together, from those years until the events of 9/11. I worked in just about every corridor and most of the floors of that building. I met countless thousands of people, both military and civilian. Most of those people I consider as friends. My wife made several promotions through the years as an Army civil servant. She was excited about where she worked, who she worked for, and the fact that she was doing her small part to make the system work better. On the day her world ended, Cheryle got up at 3 a.m., got dressed, and drove herself to work at 4:30. My last recollection of her was standing in her bedroom combing her hair. We said goodbye, and I told her I'd call her later to see if she wanted to come home early. This was one of those days when her illnesses made her very sick, but being sick never stopped her from work, from her duty. I followed her to work about a half hour later. This was our normal schedule for almost 15 years. And although I was on leave, I went to work anyway. Leave was year-end, use or lose type of leave in the military, but that did not mean I did not do my job. And I credit my wife Cheryle with showing me that side of the work ethic. I called Cheryle at about 8:30. She sounded like she was hurting. In fact, she told me her head was just pounding. That meant usually that her blood pressure was elevated, but true to her form, she said no to going home at that time. I told her I'd been invited to participate in a meeting in Roslyn, and I should be back in the early afternoon. That was the last time I talked to my wife. I know I told her I loved her, and for that I'm ever so grateful. When the plane hit the Pentagon an hour later, I felt the shudder 2 miles away in Roslyn. When I looked out the window and saw the first plume of smoke go up, I simultaneously heard the TV announcer in the back room say that the south parking lot of the Pentagon had been hit by an airplane. My heart stopped, because I just knew that was where Cheryle worked, and something told me she was in danger. I ran the 2 miles back to the Pentagon, through Arlington Cemetery. I spent an entire day until 11:30 that night, working, praying, and hoping at the side of the building we called home. It was not until the next morning that I got the official word from the Army that my wife Cheryle, my bride of almost 25 years, was on the missing list. That is what happened to Cheryle and 183 others that day. What has happened to the families and friends since that day is another story. I like to think of 9/11 as an event, and what we do now as a journey after the event. Every once in a while, someone or something will take us back to that day. Those are the triggers from the event. We hope that as time goes by, the triggers become less in frequency and the results less in depth. This is the reason I said yes to coming to be before you today. What you do here, the results you obtain, and the recommendations you send forward will, I sincerely hope, lessen those triggers for all of us. I found early on in my grieving process that to hold on to anger brought on resentment. And with resentment came sleepless nights, foggy days, and bad memories. So you won't hear anger from me. I won't talk about what people should have done, for that would be to try to blame place on others. That may be part of what you end up doing, but is not part of my responsibility. I will, however, give you some personal observations. I watched that day as everyone with any authority tried to take charge of something, or take charge of anything, but no one was really in charge. No matter how many times the scenario of a plane crashing into the Pentagon during takeoff or landing at National Airport had been practiced, no one was prepared for this attack. I know many of the Defense Protective Service, and there is not one of them that I would fault for not doing their job and then some that day. I know many of the building support personnel, and they too are above reproach and blame. I have worked for many of the top level and mid-level managers of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. Each one of them and their subordinates did what their training and their instincts directed them to do. Some of them died trying. If there's anything to blame is that our systems, our bureaucracies, and an inflexibility towards change. That is normal for bureaucracies and large systems. That is what happened on 9/11. Those who are used to change are trained to respond to events demanding instant change, or the police, the fire, and the rescue. Bureaucrats do not like change. In fact, they fear it. For their programs may go away, and with it their very existence. So when these same bureaucrats tried to respond to 9/11 events, they were not prepared for it. But we should not blame them for that, because we may have made them what they are. We do this with our antiquated programming, budgeting, and execution methods. We do this by outsourcing almost everything we do until we make our government managers policymakers rather than decision makers. We cannot fault our fine nonprofit organizations and the multitude of companies that responded to the needs starting within many hours of the tragedy. These people brought everything they could think of, provide every service they could, and extended themselves usually at a loss of profit. But within months of the event, the attitude of these same people, not all of them to be sure, but a lot of them, went back to the way they had been before 9/11. They did what so many of our own citizens did. They reverted to what was comfortable and known. This is one of the prime laws of systems thinking, of which I happen to be having a doctorate in. It tells us that systems always reverts to where it is comfortable. That's where bureaucracies go, back to being comfortable. Some of the organizations that responded had gone through similar incidents in response like this before. Some of them already had response models they could modify quickly. But the vast majority of responders did not have a clue because it was so much bigger, so much different than anything they'd ever seen before. And now almost a year and a half has gone by and we still don't have any more models of crisis response than we had before. I'm certain that some bureaucrats have probably worked on a few of those and spent several millions of dollars of public funds to try to get a model going. But I suspect that when push comes to shove, God forbid, those models will become shelfware. For until our bureaucracies start to train themselves on how to change, on how to be flexible and pliable, they will never be in a position to respond properly to events such as 9/11. I trust that what you do here will be guided by finding answers, not placing blame. I trust that you will search out the truth, no matter where it leads, and pass that truth to those who can make changes that matter. I trust that you will do the next right thing. As you call your witnesses and try to find out what happened and why, please try to remember that those who were at the sites that day, those who lost loved ones and friends, those who were injured, are still going through their private and individualized trauma and grief processes. Some may be angry, many may be depressed, some may be distraught, and others may have their own agendas. Try to understand that each of these people will try to do their best given the circumstances that befell them. You are now part of their healing process. I know you will do right by them and right by our great country, the United States of America. Thank you once again for the honor of being here today, and God bless.